Hello everyone, and welcome to Sadurdays, where we review sad stories, sad videos, etc. Well, mostly read them or watch them and react to them, but yeah. Anyway, so for today's episode, I decided let's do something that hits a little close to home. As of now, it is currently the month of May, or almost, depending on when this comes up on the YouTubes. But on that note, that means it's pretty close to summer, and so there's a very real problem of, people forgetting their kids in their car. It gets super duper hot, and then when they come back, the kids literally, it's like they've been cooked to death, so to speak. Either they died of the heat exhaustion, or they're basically ready to be served to cannibal barbecue. So that's why I said, let's start off the season with a sad story that could be true, but is done fictitiously, but in a way that it sounds like it could actually play out in real life, even if maybe a bit exaggerated. Too long didn't read. Don't leave your kids in a hot car; they will die. And it should be noted I also used my Grammarly tool to edit all of these works, so it may sound different than the originals linked below. Alright, autopilot. Have you ever forgotten your phone? When did you realize you'd forgotten it? I'm guessing you didn't just smack your forehead and exclaim, "Damn," apropos of nothing. The realization probably didn't dawn on you spontaneously. More likely you reached for your phone, pawing open your pocket or handbag, and were momentarily confused by it not being there. Then you did a mental recap of the morning's events. Shit. I rested my case. In my case, my phone's alarm woke me up as usual, but I realized the battery was lower than expected. It was a new phone and had this annoying habit of leaving applications running that drained the battery overnight. So I put it on to charge while I showered instead of into my bag like usual. It was a momentary slip from routine, but that was all it took. Once in the shower, my brain got back into the routine it follows every morning, and that was it. Forgotten. This wasn't just me being clumsy, as I later researched. This is a recognized brain function. Your brain doesn't work just on one level, it works on many. Like when you're walking somewhere, you think about your destination and avoiding hazards, but you don't need to think about keeping your legs moving correctly. If you did, the entire world would turn into one massive, hilarious Quap cosplay. I wasn't even thinking about regulating my breathing. I considered whether I should grab a coffee on the drive to work. I did. I wasn't thinking about moving my breakfast through my intestines. I was wondering whether I'd finish on time to pick up my daughter Emily from nursery after work, or get stuck with another late fee. This is the thing. There's a level of your brain that just deals with routines, so the rest of your brain can think about other things. Think about it. Think about your last commute. What do you actually remember? Probably little, if anything. Most common journeys blur into one, and recalling any one in particular is scientifically proven to be complicated. Do something often enough and it becomes routine. Keep doing it and it stops being processed. By the thinking bit of the brain gets regulated to a part of the brain dedicated to dealing with routine. Your brain keeps doing it without you even thinking about it. Soon you think about your routine to work as much as you do keeping your legs moving when you walk. People call it autopilot, but there's danger there. If you have a break in your routine, your ability to remember and account for it is only as good as your ability to stop your brain from going into standard mode. My ability to remember my phone being on the counter is only as reliable as my ability to control my brain entering morning routine mode, which would dictate that my phone is actually in my bag. But I didn't stop my brain from entering normal mode. I got into the shower like usual, and my routine started. The exception was forgotten. Autopilot engaged. My brain was back in the routine. I showered, I shaved, and the radio forecasted fantastic weather. I gave Emily her breakfast and loaded her into the car. She was so adorable that morning. She complained about the bad sun in the morning blinding her, saying it stopped her from having a little sleep on the way to nursery, and left. That was my routine. It didn't matter that my phone was on the counter charging silently. My brain was in rhythm, and in it my phone was in my bag. This is why I forgot my phone. Not clumsiness, not negligence, nothing more than my brain entering normal mode and overriding the exception. Autopilot engaged. I left for work. It's a sweltering hot day already. The lousy sun had been burning since before my traitorously absent phone woke me. The steering wheel was burning hot to the touch when I sat down. I think I heard Emily shift over behind my driver's seat to get out of the glare, but I got to work. Submitted the report, attended the morning meeting. It's not until I took a quick coffee break and reached for my phone that the illusion shattered. I did a mental restep and remembered the dying battery. I remembered putting it on to charge. I remembered leaving it there. My phone was on the counter. Autopilot disengaged. Again, there lies the danger. Until you have that moment, the moment you reach for your phone and shatter the illusion, that part of the brain is still in normal mode. It has no reason to question the routine facts. That's why it's a routine. It's an act of repetition. It's not as if anyone could say, "Why didn't you remember your phone? Didn't it occur to you? How could you forget? You must be negligent." This is to miss the point. My brain told me that the routine was completed as usual, even though it wasn't. It wasn't that I forgot my phone. According to my brain, according to the pattern, my phone was in my bag. Why would I think to question it? Why would I check? Why would I suddenly remember out of nowhere that my phone was on the counter? My brain was wired into the routine, and it was that my phone was in my bag. The day continued to bake. The morning haze gave way to the relentless fever heat of the afternoon. Tarmac bubbled. The direct beams of heat threatened to crack the pavement. People swapped coffees for iced smoothies. Jackets discarded, sleeves rolled up, ties loosened, brows mopped. The park slowly filled with sunbathers and barbecues. Window frames threatened to warp and the thermometer continued to swell. Thank fuck the offices were air-conditioned. But as ever, the furnace of the day gave way to a more relaxed evening. Another day, another dollar. Still cursing myself for forgetting my phone, I drove home. The day's heat had baked the inside of the car, releasing a horrible smell from somewhere. When I arrived on the driveway, the stones crunching comfortingly under my tires. My wife greeted me at the door. "Where's Emily?" Fuck. As if my phone wasn't bad enough. After everything, I'd left Emily at the fucking nursery after all. I'd immediately sped back to the nursery. I got to the door and started practicing my excuses, wondering vainly if I could charm my way out of a late fee. I saw a piece of paper stuck in the door. "Due to vandalism overnight, please use the side door, today only." Overnight what? The door was fine this morning. I froze. My knees shook. Vandals. A change in the routine. My phone was on the counter. I hadn't been here this morning. My phone was on the counter. I'd driven past because I was drinking my coffee. I'd not dropped off Emily. My phone was on the counter. She'd moved in her seat. I hadn't seen her in the mirror. My phone was on the counter. She'd fallen asleep out of the lousy sun. She didn't speak when I drove past her nursery. My phone was on the counter. She'd changed the routine. My phone was on the counter. She'd changed the routine, and I'd forgotten to drop her off. My phone was on the counter. 9 hours. That car. That baking sun. No air. No water. No power. No help. That heat. A steering wheel too hot to touch. That smell. I walked to the car door. Numb. Shock. I opened the door. The phone was on the counter. My daughter was dead. Autopilot disengaged. And that was Autopilot. Final thoughts? Very realistically done. I mean, and this definitely sounds like the sort of thing that would have happened if people didn't report these sorts of incidents in certain parts of town. Like I've heard several stories on the news of, oh, kid left in hot car, Good Samaritan rescues them. But how many more do we not hear about that, unfortunately, are left to bake in that sort of situation? So, yeah, don't leave your kids there, seriously. I know it's easy to get stuck in a routine, but make part of your routine checking your car to make sure that they're not still in there, if you have to. That's my advice. But then again, I'm not a parent. I'm just a guy that reads and writes for a living. Well, not exactly for a living, just, for side money while he does other things. You probably could guess why based on the uniform I'm normally wearing when I do these videos. But, yeah. Anywho, now the next story was initially a Majari Bread show exclusive creepypasta, and so I listened to what his final thoughts were and edited it for some of the problems he had mentioned. And the main thing that stood out to me was he said that it was more sad than scary. So it seemed appropriate for a Sad Your Days show. And it's a Pokepasta called I Won't Hear the Elevator. This Pokemon creepypasta is about Luminous City Ghost Girl and Pokemon X and Y and offers a speculative backstory into what she may be. It is entitled I Won't Hear the Elevator. I've been here for way too long. I've been there for even longer. No, you're not the one. She's not even close. The man has the same hair, but he would have never been caught dead training something as apparent as a Charmander. The elevator clinks. Once again, my fingers brush against the only Pokeball I have left, and I prepare to advance forward, still hopeful that my man has come to retrieve me. It's a girl. She wears a red dress on top, belted at the waist, and falls back under her thighs beneath our knee-high socks and black sneakers. I've already begun to come forward, hearing my faded black Mary Jane shoes padding on the wooden floor. The girl turns slightly and startled. Having no chance to dissolve, I simply say, "No, you're not the one," and walk to the wall. "Wait," she cries, "what do you mean?" But I'm already gone. I need to get back to where everything began, back to where this memory is still tangible in the very air, back to Hotel Richissime, if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not good at foreign languages, to be honest. Let me go back to the beginning. It was summertime in Victorian Lumio City. I was barely 18 and in love. I was born to a family of low social standing and thereby forced to work as a domestic servant. Each morning I donned a short yet conservative black dress and walked to the home, hand in hand with my loyal Gotharita, who danced together down the streets. Musicians played pseudo-noblemen lounged outside the many cafes. Go-goat ferried people down the road, and starving houndor scurried about, searching for the scraps amidst the bits and pieces of trash which littered the streets. Although I lived a dull life, I took solace in only two beings I related to. My Gotharita had been hatched the same day I was born. We were both orphans. My mother died in childbirth, and Pokemon, with few exceptions, raised themselves. We had each other, and that was it. Until I turned 15. An average child of my age would have been prepared for marriage at that age. But I had no father to arrange one for me. Instead, I began working for the Changnon family as a housekeeper, and I resigned to live my life as a spinster. They were of Calovian nobility, and I quickly fell in love with their son Gabriel. He too showed signs of attraction to me. He had only one Pokemon, a male Sableye whom he called Mori. As I walked, Gotharita spent hours playing in the courtyard with Mori. Finally, on a smoldering day in July, his soft blue eyes met mine in the hallway. He passed me a note on crisp white paper. "I cannot read," I stammered, my face turning red in embarrassment. Rio simply smiled and winked. I dared not open the scrap of paper until I was on the way home. Gotharita seemed edgy the whole day. Her demeanor mimicked the unsteady hammering of my heart. The end of the day approached and eventually came. I pulled out the note and excitedly unfolded it. Upon it was scrolled two small pictures and a number. A minimal rendering of Hotel Richissime. A small clock face showing 9 o'clock and the number 404. It was already 8:30, so I rushed into the hotel. Inside, a man greeted me. He knew who I was and led me into a room which would become my prison. Gotharita panted on the floor beside me. I dropped to my knees to care for my best friend. Her eyes had been pained all day. Her midsection was distended. Her cry was weak. A fancy clock over the fireplace, which would soon be replaced for radio and then for television, struck 9. A knock emanated from the door. I kissed my friend's head and went to answer the door. In front of me stood the breathtaking face, Gabriel. His hands clasped around a bundle of wildflowers and Mori riding on his shoulder. Heard a shrill screech came from Gotharita, then a deadly silence. I rushed to her side. Her face was still and peaceful. A small smile planted on her face. Guthrida had collapsed into an exhausted slumber. Beside her laid an egg, smeared slightly with blood. Sableye gingerly approached and crouched beside my friend. She was fine. She did not suffer and would eventually make a full recovery. As the summer and subsequent years went by, Gabriel and I continued to meet in the hotel room. We cared for countless eggs parented by our Pokemon and loved each other in the way only adults can. Eventually, Gabriel was married to a noblewoman of the name Constance. She was gorgeous, with blonde hair and perfect social standing. I was nothing compared to her. Still, Gabriel assured me that he would only love me. Maury, we could tell, had no interest in Constance's glitzy jinx, and although our visits became less frequent, they were no less passionate. The train station came to Luminos in 1897, and we found a way to communicate more efficiently. The schedule and our many visits had taught me to read and write. On his way home from the office, he would stop by the train station and scrawl a note to me. The letter told me where to meet him and when. It would usually take me back to room 404 of the Hotel Richissimi. On an autumn day in late 1890s, we conceived a bastard. Summer came around again and my belly grew round. I hid the growth behind my plain black dresses as my day grew closer. Guthrida laid her last egg and prepared to hatch it. As I worked on a sweltering June day, the pain in my belly caused sweat to break out on my forehead. It was happening. Gabriel knew by my face when he returned home for lunch. He instructed Constance to let me off a few hours early. I was grateful. I hurried to Lumino Station to check for a message. Contractions were far enough apart that I was only in pain, not in a hurry. There was scrawled in messy text, "I'm going to go for help. Wait in the usual place." Usual place, room 404, Hotel Richissimi. Outside, I hopped aboard a lingering go-goat, deposited 200 Poke-yen into a small pouch around its neck, and instructed it to bring me to the hotel. I would never see Gabriel again. In our room, I gave birth to a girl child whom I named Antoinette. She cried feebly once and passed away in my arms. Tears streamed down my cheeks and peppered my baby's bloody face. Next to me, Gotharida's warm, trembling egg grew still and cold. Her Gothita baby popped out dead before it could even fall to the bedspread. Things grew dark from there on. I lost my will to live. My baby dead, my only Pokemon devastated by loss. My baby weakened and bleeding from fetal childbirth. My body weakened and bleeding from fetal childbirth. Out of her Pokeball popped Gotharita. She had tears in her eyes. They looked lifeless, full of the same heart-wrenching pain I felt. Gotharita, I commanded, clutching my cold daughter in my arms. Use future sight on me. She obeyed, and I readied my body for the life-ending blow, which would come in a few minutes. Gotharita, you've been the best companion I could ever have in this life, but now I'm ready to go. I wish I could say goodbye to my Gabriel, but I need to go now. As I uttered the final word, future sight took hold of my body. It tangled my insides and scrambled my brain and severed my shattered heart. I died with a sad smile on my lips, my baby in one arm and the Pokemon in the other. In death, one does not immediately ascend to the afterlife. I woke in the hotel room, confused. My body felt like nothing, and I had been dead for several weeks. My body was gone, laid to rest by Gabriel's family and my baby with her. Gotharita appeared at my side a day later. In death, we could finally communicate. She told me that without me and without her last baby, she could not go on living. So she ended her life. She had gone back to the home of our lovers that night to find both missing. She decided she'd join me with nobody else in the world and committed suicide next to my body, which had yet to be seen by anyone. So while we waited, it was all we could do. Gotharita could come and go from her Pokeball, but I was stuck in the hotel room. I waited for him. If I tried to leave, I would only be taken to Gabriel's office. I frequently felt that he was approaching and he would rush to his office, only to be disappointed. It was yet another stupid trainer who had stumbled into the wrong building looking for a lab of some buffoonish professor. That or just looking around the city at all the places they could. Mostly, though, I stayed in the hotel room. People came and went. Some saw me, most could not. Many complained of the deathly chill in the room when they stayed. Others tried to get me to leave by various methods. My soul could not be broken. I just needed to say goodbye. Gabriel and Maury never showed up again at the hotel room. I waited and waited. The fireplace was replaced by the radio by the television. Months, years, decades went by. Even the stairs were replaced by the much more convenient and fashionable elevator. Still, I'm waiting. The hotel hardly ever rents out a room anymore. Guthrie and I don't mind. We just sit and wait. Every once in a while, somebody will come into the room who can see me. They try and speak, but I usually ignore them. Coming back once again from Gabriel's office, I continue to listen for his arrival. More days pass, and once again I meet the female trainer in the black and red dress. She's inside my room and sees me. She recognizes me. With a horrified yet excited look on her face, she barrages me with questions about our first meeting. What was I talking about? How I disappeared? Who I was, and on and on. I answer none of her questions. They don't matter. Instead, I simply respond, "Don't talk to me. If you do, I won't hear the elevator." And that was, I won't hear the elevator. Final thoughts? I think I did okay at fixing some of the problems outlined, but to make this creepy would require a complete overhaul, and thus, there would have to be a little more than grimness going on with respect to the story itself. But otherwise, even the original version was good as a tragedy tale, more than it was a scary story or a creepy story or anything of that nature. So in that sense, I could see someone turning this into like a novel at some point, the concept anyway. Maybe because of copyrights they couldn't, do that unless they got permission from like Game Freak or something. But now for the last story of our show. It's about a tragic tale of a boy who went a horribly abusive childhood, who had a seemingly benevolent figure grant him everything he wants, but at a price. Was it worth it? Let's find out. The sad reality. Hello, my name is Damien, and today I'm going to tell you a little story. It is about my childhood. It all started when I was only 5 years old. My family was always unstable. My dad and mom used to get angry over little things and eventually beat me up. My older brother had died in a horrible car crash when I was a baby. I didn't have many friends, but then one night he came. I couldn't exactly see him, but he could see me. His crimson eyes were always right there in the dark corner during the night. Once he came, everything changed. I always hesitated at bedtime. I could be with my new friend. We would always talk about various stuff, from my misadventures in kindergarten to more grown-up topics such as wars and other things grown-ups spoke about. I never called him any particular name, neither did he want to be called something. As time went by, he began to be more and more aware of my desires. As for him, I could only see his crimson eyes staring at me from the dark corner of my room. Always there for me during the night, his voice was calm and steady. It was always a pleasure listening to his soft baritone voice in the night silence. He always used eloquent words and never argued with me. I never told Mom about him. She would just shout and slap me, sending me off to sleep. I knew better, that I should keep such stuff in complete secrecy. I still remember that foggy night. I could feel something peculiar in my room. He was there again. He started rambling about fame and how he could make me whatever I wanted to be. He stated he knew what I wanted, what I always wished for. I could spot the difference. His voice was obscure and raspy. Before he vanished, he told me this: "When you need help, expect help from me, dear friend." It felt like it wasn't him, but it still was. Then when I was 10, he suddenly disappeared. He didn't leave any notes, any signs, nothing. He just left. Things sadly started getting worse when I was 15. I was addicted to drugs and would casually smoke a blunt in front of the school every day or so. I was a complete wreck. Thanks to that poison I inhaled, I was skinny and sick all the time. I would occasionally get bullied because of my music tastes. All of those judging laughs filled my soul with hatred towards the world. My family was becoming fucked up with every day that passed. Depression, hate. It was dark and ominous that the night I chose to run away. Somewhere far from this unpleasant damned pit called a city. I sheltered myself in an abandoned car facility, wondering what I had done to get my life to an even more miserable state. I went off to sleep. I woke up in a lovely house. My mom woke me up, actually. She carried breakfast, eggs and bacon. Delicious, I thought to myself. But then I was like, wait, what? Where am I? Then I remembered it all. I figured out my long-forgotten friend had done me a favor, the best one possible. Fortunately, I wasn't skinny at all. I was just average. We had a lovely house also. Beautiful white tappets and black leather furniture. The home of my dreams. My parents were also loving and caring. But most important, my brother was alive. I've seen him only in photos, but now he was standing right next to me. He was pretty tall and fit. He was actually a jolly fellow. We'd always go to school, and on our way we'd discuss different matters. From the hot next door girl to what car I should get when I have a driver's license. I also got the girl of my dreams, the same interests as mine, and she was beautiful, loving, and loyal. And the sun spread its warm beams of light and wrapped her in them. She looked astounding. But it was that autumnal day that things got to turn to the worse. Ironically, the weather was auspicious, a silent autumnal night. My brother and I were coming back from school. The only sound we could hear was the falling, nearly dried leaves hitting the sidewalk. There's also the feeling like someone behind you. The sensation grew more substantial, more robust, when a hand from behind reached and grabbed my brother. 2 bullies from school were after us the whole time. They were around my brother's age. One of them was skinny and tall. The other one was fat. Like really fat. The skinny guy had a mark right through his eye. Before I could react, the scrawny guy put a knife to my brother's throat. The other one, the fat bastard, started talking in a dark, monotonous tone. Well, if it ain't a coincidence we meet. Oh, I forgot to introduce ourselves. I'm Rick, and this is my buddy Tom. You will give us all your money, or there will be another way out. But I immediately snapped. I still remember the dark times I went through. With all the hate gathered in my fist, I punched the fat fuck in the face. I felt his nose crumble under the hit of my fist. The one with the knife didn't even hesitate and slit my brother's throat. With the help of the adrenaline rush, I jumped on him and we began fighting on the ground. I punched him in the gut and he gasped for air and stabbed me. With the last drop of power left in me, I summoned the inhumane in me. I'd pierced both of them in their hearts. I went to my brother's, but there was no use. He was dead already. Again, but this time in front of my eyes. And it was all my fault. If I gave my money and didn't resist, we would be okay. Dazed, I fell to the ground and was trying to stay conscious for as long as I could, but my struggles were useless. Before slipping into unconsciousness from blood loss, I heard that familiar, calm, deep baritone laughter. I woke up in the hospital and to see my parents beside me. I was right, my beloved brother was dead. My parents were crying a few weeks. After a few weeks, my wounds have healed. I went back home. At 15, without a brother again, I felt that sickening depression hit on me again. Fortunately, I still had my loving parents and my more than a sister girlfriend. I don't know what went through my mind back then, but I liked playing with fires. I figured out it would be a good idea to light a candle in my room. Just a small one, I said to myself. Since my parents were sleeping, it wouldn't be a problem. Oh, I was wrong. One day I met with the most horrible experience of my entire life that I will never forget. I was woken by one of the most horrifying shrieks you can imagine. I immediately jumped out of bed to be presented with a ring of fire. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. My mother was screaming downstairs. My dad was trying to put out the fire, but it was no use. It would spread all over the house. We were trapped. There was no way we could call 911 because the phone was already turned to ash. I could hear my parents' screams still echoing in my head. I fell down crying, praying the flames would take me and punish me for what I've done. No, I saw those red eyes staring at me in the dark, then I just fell. I woke up several days later, which felt like minutes, but I couldn't see anything. I was in the hospital again. Heard footsteps. It was a nurse. She told me, "Oh, you're awake. Sorry to tell you, but your parents are dead." So sorry. Parents had called 911, but it was way too late. You're so lucky to be alive. You were burned like an overcooked steak, but we managed to bandage you all up. You'll be released in about a week or two. Immediately jumped, but the nurse just put me back down in bed. I was trying not to cry because it hurt so much. After a few months, I managed to recover, but I still had my friends and my love. I was living with her and my parents, as a matter of fact, but the thought of what I'd done floated over me like a cloud. All day and all night. It was November. The class went on a school trip that was totally not worth the money. Why? Well, the bus fell into an abyss thanks to the icy roads. Most of my friends died in the accident. Fortunately, I didn't even have a scratch on my body, only the scars of the burns. All I had was my only living precious thing, my girl, my love, my everything. We were getting even closer. We were one of the few who managed to survive. We would always help each other in hard times and impossible times. It was December, a cold, snowy, and windy night. The melancholic wind pounded against the windows. I was in my love's room. We were watching TV when I heard the screams downstairs. I'll go and see what's up. I took my pocket knife, my favorite one. I'll come with you, please. As you say, but there's something wrong. I sense it. And we went down only to see her parents torn apart and hanged with their guts. She couldn't resist and burst out in tears. I was staring in disbelief. "What the fuck?" I yelled. "We must run." And grabbed her hand. She managed to get up and follow me. With a few kicks, the door was open. Adrenaline rush works miracles. Then and there I saw him in his full horror, the so-called friend of mine, standing under my lamplight. The ground was covered in thick snow, so it was hard to make quick moves. My childhood memories swung back with full force. I made the connection. The death of my brother, the fire, the bus crash. It was him granting my wishes before I woke up in this paradise-like nightmare. We stood there in horror, analyzing his black figure. All we managed to differentiate in the darkness is his arms. They were long and skinny, ending with long, sharp blades. Just as him, black. He was standing there as if waiting for us. His eyes finally managed to stare into my soul. He came closer to standing in front of me and uttered with his deep, calm voice, "Your wishes are granted, my dear friend." We were still staring at him, speechless, except one. He swiftly rushed her and stabbed her in the stomach. Blood came out of Ashley's mouth. Her warm blood poured onto the white covering of the ground, painting it a dark red. She was motionless in blood. I was more than angry, pissed off, ticked off, complete with hate. Sad. A cluster of emotions. What was I left with? My best friend had betrayed me. He'd murdered all my precious, my brother, my family, my friends. He destroyed my life in front of my very eyes. The beast then turned his head and looked at me with terrifying crimson eyes. "Have you wondered how I keep them red? Well, now you do. I fool idiots like you in my trap, promising them all the best, playing what..." He couldn't finish his words. I channeled all the hate I had gathered. I charged that thing with my knife. I successfully managed to pierce it in the right eye. I then proceeded with the rest of him. With that chillingly calm voice, it said to me, "Finally, I've granted your final wish," and it just melted down into the snow. With barely any powers, I managed to drag myself to my love. She was fine. We both healed. We grew up and are married. We have 2 children, a 5-year-old son and a gorgeous 3-year-old daughter. As I was walking up to my son's bedroom, I heard that familiar voice. I panicked and quickly made my way to his room. The door was closed, actually locked. I heard it. It was his voice. "Welcome to the sad reality." And I listened to my son scream. Then the door opened to reveal a gruesome sight. He was torn apart. He was just laying on the ground in front of the room, split in half. Blood was all over the place. I was just left speechless, just staring. Tears were rolling down my cheeks. I want to die. Oh God, I want to die. I wish my life was never given. I hope I die as soon as... Damien woke up. He fell asleep by his laptop while he was writing a story. Cold sweat covered his hands. He realized it was only a dream, but a scream broke the silence. It was his mom. Damien quickly ran into the kitchen only to see the words, "Welcome to the sad reality," painted with his mother's blood on the walls. His mom was hanged with her guts. Damien was thunderstruck. He saw crimson eyes gazing at him from out of the window, and then he heard a deep baritone laughter and a raspy voice said, "Welcome to the sad reality." And that was the sad reality. Wow. I mean, that was sad, that was creepy, that was scary. I mean, this could have either been Saturday or Monster Mondays with the kind of stuff that was going on in that particular story, but since there was a lot more tragedy that was the central focus, I erred on it being a sad story more than a scary one, personally. And with that, this has been Saturdays. It's me, the Forsaken Scribe. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you were amused in some way or moved by some of the stories that were presented here. Thank you. Bye-bye.